Thank the Force. We're here. Star Wars Newsnet live on a Thursday night, 10 o'clock Eastern Time. Going to be talking about whether or not any of these four shows on your screen, Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Skeleton Crew, even the Acolyte here deserves or should get a second season. However, before we get into all of that, let me introduce the people that, honestly, you should be knowing at this point if you've been tuning in. But Miguel joining me twice in 1 week, which is it's a record for 2025. And then Nate, who took a 1 week vacation. He's back with plenty of more nubs in the background, fresh off of what'd you say? You watched Companion today, and you saw Brutalist last week. So you've been
I've been going to the
theater.
I also saw Presence the other day as well. What else did I see? I saw Complete Unknown the other day too. I've been just, making my regular rounds. I've been trying to see as much as I possibly can. Yeah, before I run out of time before more Star Wars stuff comes up.
Well, that's going to be another 5 years, so don't worry.
Yeah. Yeah, I got books and comics and stuff to read, man.
I got 3 things for us today in terms of Star Wars news to hit on. I got 3 things, and it's some hard-hitting stuff here. Let's just go ahead and get into the news, guys. Number 1, probably the most important thing that we can take away from this week is that the Galactic or former Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel is being converted into office space, and you may be thinking, wow, what a botched attempt at a Star Wars hotel. Colossal failure. I look at it completely differently. I like to look at this as I am impressed to see the commitment to Star Wars from the Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel here, because with Andor Season 2 coming up, they decided to take the Andor Season 2 theme, and they're turning the space into a Cyril Karn themed hotel space, and the office space is really just going to be the portables from Andor Season 2 when he was at, and if I got this correct, the fuel purity sector of the Imperial Bureau of Standards on Coruscant. Honestly, I've seen a lot of slander on Twitter online about how this is just a big failure, but really this is them just getting as deep into the weeds of Star Wars as possible, and for us that should be something that we celebrate here on Star Wars Newsnet Live, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. They just spent like hundreds of millions of dollars into a promotional stunt, so why not?
It is, when you think about it, in all seriousness, how wild is it that they announced this hotel? This hotel came out, it failed pretty much instantly, and then those of us at Star Wars Newsnet Live that cover these books and comics that come out were forced to read about the Star Cruiser Hotel being,
and all of them are pretty good. All of them are pretty good for the most part.
And being forced to read about it all, only to have it then just completely shut down not long afterwards. And I remember when this thing was announced, and I was so excited just thinking about the prospect of a full-fledged Star Wars vacation. And I started looking at the prices, and I'm like, wow, this has to be the best experience ever. And then the line dancing video went viral, and that's when I said, oh no, what is going on here? Nate, I have to ask, were you ever tempted to dabble in the Star Wars hotel experience before you saw any of the videos and stuff that came out later?
Well, even after seeing all the videos and stuff, I was still curious. You hear some of the stories of how it all goes, and you're just curious. But then I hear other stuff that the whole experience. So you go to this thing expecting a luxury experience vacation type of thing, and then you basically hear that's a 48-hour role-playing adventure where you don't really have any time to yourself to do anything, to take in the sights and the luxury that is being on the Halcyon. So it's what's the point of dropping, what was it, $5,000 for a whole night? It was some ridiculous,
it was $5,000 for 48 hours.
It's absolutely insane. It's absolutely insane.
And that didn't include your ticket to Disney.
Right.
Like it didn't even include your ticket to Disney or any of the food and drink. Like that's just to stay, to stay there.
Right. Like some people save their entire lives to go to Disney and once, and that's it. Like, I don't know what they were thinking with this whole thing. So when I saw this story this afternoon, I'm like, I don't really care anymore. It's just funny at this point
It
how
is funny.
much they put into it to see it just reduced to rubble.
I have to laugh. I have to laugh because if I don't, I think about how sad it is that this exists.
Yep.
Miguel, I'm sure you were, saving up as much as you can, even with your busy schedule, trying to put away your coins as much as you can in the bank account to make your visit to the States and spend your one trip over across the sea at the Halcyon Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel, right?
Yeah, exactly. I've been, I was saving up for years and then they just closed it up right
Yep.
as I was about to book my
Yep.
tickets.
Well, now the
Yeah.
good thing is if you can apply for a job over
I guess.
there and you might be able to get a permanent instead of a 48-hour stay, you might get instead of having to pay 5,000 for that 48 hours, you might be able to get paid to spend your time over there
Still
on the
sleep in
daily.
those little like jail cell beds that they have in there.
It's the office spaces. They've just converted the bunks into these little
Oh my
cubicles, and
God.
you got someone
It's just-
sitting
it's
above you while
wild.
you're typing down here. That has to be just a
I
nightmare.
hope they play into it and actually like take pictures and show us and show everyone working just to see what it looks like. Just play into it. Like just admit your failures and just show us what it's like in there now that it's just fully office space.
That's
Just
what I
remake
Sydney-
Office Space.
Sydney said it's just Cyril on a cubicle farm. That's what I said. That's literally what I said to open up. It was so funny. Except and instead of a 1 hour lunch break, you have a 30-minute lunch break followed by 30 minutes of mandatory line dancing that takes place and with everyone else. Miguel is a big Skeleton Crew fan. Would you change your mind on all of this if Neil
would
from
never go-
Skeleton was there, Miguel?
Why would it? I mean, so what is the question here? If Neil was there, would it change my mind of
He'd be
not
aged
going
up. He'd
or
be aged
going?
up.
Going, yeah.
He'd be
You're
aged
gonna-
up.
But I want to
Neil.
go.
But
I don't want to
he's
go.
like, I'm dying to be
I
there.
really
The
don't.
problem is with that is like it was so. I mean, it was pitched as an in-universe thing. So if Neil was actually there, it'd be a really old Neil. That wouldn't be the cute guy. He'd be Neil would be just at the bar all day long, just
He's
popping
now
drinks
Neil
after
the
the
sage.
experience that he had with John. So
Wait,
he's
when is
traumatized.
this supposed
Neil's
to take
traumatized.
place?
It's during the sequel era, like
yeah,
No,
so it's
okay.
between eight
like
and nine,
in between
I believe.
8 and 9. Yeah.
So in between 8 and 9, they have so much free time. They can just spend it at the hotel. There's no galactic
I
war
don't
going
know.
on or whatever.
I don't
Well,
know.
I mean, if you're staying aboard the Halcyon, you are among the galaxy's
guess
elite.
so.
You're kind of staying out of the way of, we're
I
talking about
guess so.
those of us that are traveling to Canto
Yeah.
Bight on the way.
But Ray and
Yeah,
Kylo Ren
exactly.
still find their way on and have a battle. So I don't know. It's
I will say that the publishing stuff from the Halcyon, some of it's pretty good. Like the
Yeah.
Princess and Scoundrel book that came out. So some of it,
yeah.
I'll have my fond memories of it as we leave it behind us. But in some actual, Star Wars news that came out, we learned who the new Jedi Order writer is right now, or should I say the new Jedi Order writer is, because I believe this is our third. We're on our third writer attached to the project now. So I guess the real
rotation. There was
Okay,
like
so-
2 writers at the beginning, so yeah.
so the real question is, who's going to be the fourth writer in 6 months when we part ways for creative differences or just too busy of a schedule, and then we could talk about what we think George Nolfi will bring to the project, of course.
I mean, there's a few ways to interpret this news. First of all, I'm not aware that he has a very busy schedule, so it's not like Stephen Knight, who had to shoot the Peaky Blinders movie, so he
Mhm.
wasn't like whatever, year and a half timeline that he
Mhm.
had to read the script. So as long as he doesn't have anything else, that's just everything's open for him. And then there's the issue of his leverage. So I don't think that in a creative discussion he is going to be the one to say either we go with my idea or I leave. So it's gonna be he's more of a hired gun from what his IMDb profile looks like, you know.
Mhm.
And honestly, I haven't really caught up with his most recent stuff, so I'm not quite sure what the bunker was like. But uh, I mean, most people have brought up what was it, Ocean's 12, and then the Bourne Ultimatum,
Ultimatum.
which yeah, that was my favorite as well of the Bourne trilogy, and Ocean's 12 is my least favorite. But both of those movies were like 20 years ago, so I
Mhm.
don't think we should judge him from that. I think that's just he is just very different right now.
Mhm. Nate, you have any interest in this news, or are you still kind of more of a we'll just see what happens camp?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in both camps. Obviously, I'm curious to see if this sticks. At the end of the day, it's a name that has got to be looked at as just a solid hand for
Yeah,
Lucasfilm, and at this point, it would be nice just to get a script to work off of. A lot of times with these big movies, you get multiple people in the room, and what is going on with this movie is just really strange in that no one could get a script. Like, so if we can just have a baseline of what we're doing instead of just these broad ideas that Daisy Ridley and Charmin Obaid-Chinoy keep saying is out there. Well, what is it? So just getting those
That's Star
ideas
Wars
on
movies
paper.
for you. That's Star
Yeah,
Wars
just
I
movies for
mean,
you for a while now. Is what
I
can we
think he's
do
a
to get
guy
this
that
engine
gets
going?
words, gets ideas on paper, and then we'll see what happens from there. Um,
Inspiring.
he
I mean, I
has,
think
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. This movie is
Mhm.
still very far away, but
Right.
hey, any news is good news at this point. Work is being done on this movie still, which has got to count for something at the end of the day.
right. So I think that, well, first of all, we could have said the same thing about Stephen Knight 2 years ago. I think that
Yeah,
he was seen as a hired
yeah,
gun, and he's gonna
yeah, for sure.
as a solid writer who's gonna like put words on paper. And by the way, he did deliver several drafts to Lucasfilm, so it's
Okay.
not like he never even finished a draft. There were multiple drafts submitted, and I'm not sure the
Yeah, there
extent
was
of
just
the
Daisy Ridley
rewrites.
saying, "Oh, she hasn't seen the script yet," and I'm just like, "How? Like, what are we doing here?" Like, I don't quite know how all that
I
all.
mean, I don't know how true that is, first of all, and second of all, like maybe she's the third or fourth
That is
person to
true.
be called
That
on
is true.
for like this. She's not the
Actors,
the first on the
yeah,
line. Like the
actors
applicant
generally
becomes the
don't
first,
see the script
right?
until they're on stage and preparing to go
And
into
it'd be
production.
different
So,
if she was a producer, but I don't think she's been announced to be a producer yet,
yeah,
which I'm a bit
yep, that's true.
surprised about.
Yep.
But um, as far as we know, she's not producing the project, so it's not like she is supposed to be first on the
Mhm.
call sheet.
Yeah,
Well, she is
yep,
first on the call
that's
sheet,
true.
but not first on the call list for whenever the script is ready.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
was just excited to see a name attached, and maybe we can have a little
Right.
bit of more clarity on this moving forward. And hopefully, by April, when the celebration comes out, it'd be nice to know if we had a firm date for the next movie to go into production. Like, what does that look like? Is it going to be Sean
Yeah,
Levy and Ryan
yeah, it's gonna be that
Gosling's
one.
film? That's what I would assume, like
Yeah.
based off of what we saw. And is that going to happen? Essentially, they said they want to streamline that one, as soon as possible into like the fall, probably starting that production. I would love to get just like a firm yes on that at Celebration. I would hope if they're really able to do that in the fall, surely we can have a little bit of an update on some of these. It is because it's interesting to me that we're going to go into a celebration a couple years after the last, and the 3 people that they brought on stage for that celebration for feature films, like none of those people are going to be getting the the first movie treatments that are coming out for Lucasfilm. So it's a little awkward if you don't have anything to say on the movie front, and that's still the last thing that you leave us with. But we'll kind of see what happens over the next couple of months. Miguel?
I mean, they gotta like put the Sean Levy movie into production before Ryan Gosling thinks twice about it. So
That's
just
fair
Before
point.
he
don't have
realizes
much
that,
time.
oh no.
Yeah.
So there was also the news that came out this week, shifting back to Disney Plus on The Acolyte being the second most streamed Disney Plus show this year. I believe it said 2.7 billion minutes. And in a nutshell, you guys, I think, broke this down or were involved in the conversation on this week on Discord and on the site much more than I was. So I want to kind of get your feel for it and tell me if I'm wrong here. Essentially, that number of 2.7 billion minutes, second most streamed show on Disney Plus for the year, sounds really great when you think about that just in itself. But when you kind of break down the numbers of everything, it's actually pretty appalling how low that might actually be, given the money that was spent on this project comparatively to the money spent on other Disney Plus projects and where they finished, and then in just comparing the number of minutes watched to other shows that were out there as well. I saw there was online some people trying to take some victory laps for The Acolyte on this news, and while I don't want to discourage anyone from being passionate about what they love, it doesn't seem like it's the kind of victory lap that they might be, hoping it is. But you guys want to shed a little bit more light onto that, because I think there's a lot of people looking at that number going, "Is that what are we supposed to make out of that?"
Right. Um, so I mean, there are like several comparisons that we can make here. So, for example, uh, if we compare this to movies on Disney Plus, I think like Moana was viewed 5 times more minutes than Skeleton Crew combined, or something like Inside Out as well, and 4 to 5 times. I think that reflects that most people are tuning in to Disney Plus to watch, Bluey, to watch Moana, to just put these movies or kids shows on a loop and just forget about that the kids are in the house. Um, so that's like the library part of Disney Plus, and then there's the originals part, which I don't think is performing as well as shown by these numbers. By the way, we should also mention that these are third-party numbers. These are not directly taken from Disney Plus, and they haven't confirmed it.
Mhm.
So that should be like said right up front. But if you look at the specific number of 2.7 billion minutes, if you average that by 8 episodes, you get like around 330 or 340 million minutes per episode, which would probably be not enough to crack into Nielsen's top 10 most of the weeks of the year. So you're essentially talking about a show that is struggling to crack into the like top 10 of by Nielsen, which is
Mhm.
not what you want to do to be like
Right.
not where you want your Star Wars show to be at. Like you want it on the top three, most likely. Like obviously competing with Netflix is like really challenging right now, but at least try to be competitive. Like you have a huge IP and you're not like really making use of it.
And that kind of goes to the discussion that we've had before on where is Star Wars even relevant in
Right.
the mainstream when it comes to streaming at all? Like is it something that can even be relevant? And The Mandalorian showed that it can be, but we've
Right.
seen since then that just because the Star Wars name is attached, it doesn't necessarily carry the weight that you might think in the streaming world. If anything, it's less than right now. But Nate, what were your? I think did you write the one of the articles that we published for this, or
I
I'm
was
sure you looked over it a
that
little bit. Was
was
that you? Oh, that's Miguel. Okay.
yep, it was all Miguel, and reading and Miguel's article hits the nail pretty much on the head that this news isn't necessarily an indictment on Star Wars per se. It's more an indictment of Disney Plus streaming originals, television shows and whatnot, and how little attention they get. For whatever reason, people just don't watch these shows at the same rate as other big streamers. According to that report, Fallout um, was the bottom of that top 10, and heading into the year, that wasn't a show I necessarily expected to garner that level of viewing, I guess is viewing. But good for that show, good for everything else. But I mean, if you're looking at through it specifically through a Disney Plus lens, sure. But yeah, I mean, I think people, like Miguel mentioned the movies. I think a lot of people just use Disney Plus for the movies and just for that background noise for their kids or whatever. And for whatever reason, that is what Disney Plus is seen as. And I don't know how they fix that. But
let me ask you this. This might be, and this goes into what Miguel and I have talked about before. And because it's mainly because Marvel struggled mightily too in streaming as well.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a large part of people that when they think of Marvel and Star Wars, even though they know that there are shows like The Mandalorian or Loki that exist, they expect like a Marvel or Star Wars project? If there's something with those two things attached, that's a cinematic experience. That's a movie franchise,
for sure.
And they just don't even really give a show second thought necessarily with when it comes to those things. And they're like, well, I'll just wait for the movie to come out because the movie is the important stuff when it comes to these two IPs.
I definitely think that that's a large element of it. These two IPs weren't meant for television, and we're learning that quickly through it doesn't matter how good these shows are. There's just a certain section of the audience that sees this as lesser than, and I think that's also part of it as well. People just view Ahsoka, they view the Book of Boba Fett, they view Acolyte, and the Marvel side, they view Agatha and Echo and all these other shows as less than. So they're just not as enticed to watch it. Me personally, I haven't touched a Marvel streaming show for going on 2 years now. So just because
is that 2 years? When did Loki season 2 end? That's the last time I watched.
I haven't even watched Loki season 2 for God's sakes. And that's apparently a really good show. I think the last one I watched was She-Hulk, and after that I just said, nope, I'm done. And I like She-Hulk, but at that point it's like I just don't need to see any more of these. So I do think that there is a level of that from the audience. But I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to how good the content is at the end of the day. And so some people just don't like this stuff, and they're asked, and that has to be considered as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a mixed bag.
There's also something to be said about the target audience of Disney Plus. So I think Disney Plus is mostly seen as something for the families. It's not, HBO that you have to have if you are above, 23 years old, or Netflix, which is just a utility right now, or, Prime Video, which comes for free with your toilet paper. So I think there's an overabundance of services, and whenever you're looking at what should I subscribe to, I don't think Disney Plus, with its Star Wars offerings and Marvel offerings, is enough to get people enticed into signing up. And this is why I've also brought up before, and I think that this is something that they might start looking into, is offshoring their shows. So meaning sending, something like The Acolyte to Netflix and just giving them the rights for the shared rights, like Warner Brothers is doing with the HBO shows for a couple of years, so that you can watch I don't know what is it, the Issa Rae show Insecure. You can watch that on Netflix, or you can watch Band of Brothers on Netflix, and you
Mhm.
can also watch it on HBO. And guess what? Where most people are watching those shows? On Netflix, because that's where most people go when they tune in into their
Mhm.
TVs every night. That's the first option and pretty much their last one as well. So I think that there's something to be said about licensing those shows, and especially something like The Acolyte, which didn't perform as well, something like Skeleton Crew, which could benefit as well from a push elsewhere, and not as much something like The Mandalorian, which is seen as a flagship for Disney
Mhm.
Plus in general.
That could help for sure because we have seen like Mandalorian is a prime example of Star Wars can have that, mainstream reach for all audiences, all ages, but I kind of in the middle of these camps because they're I think like when Nate said they view some of the streaming as less than when we talk Star Wars, there feels like there's such a weight attached. That anytime there's been a Star Wars movie, outside of Solo, every movie is a saga film, or Rogue One, for instance, which still felt like a lot of weight was attached to that because of how directly it impacted the Skywalker saga. And so I think when you go from stories like that impactful or that meaningful to people for that long, and then you're gonna throw them a show, like shows like Book of Boba Fett or Ahsoka, I feel like there is a level of like it kind of is difficult for the average fan maybe to say, yeah, like I want to tune into that every week. Especially I think, and then the other side, like you said, Miguel, I have to buy Disney Plus, the kids streaming service, in order to tune into that. Like, I haven't heard. I don't think we've talked about your idea of sending them to other places before. So I actually
No,
really
no,
think that,
not here.
yeah, I love that idea. I think that they should absolutely do that. Maybe
I've
we
written
can
about it
actually
a bit,
play Willow again.
but no, yeah, like Willow was my first thought as well. Yeah, like Willow is like a Netflix shoe-in for me. Like that is not something that would blow up on Netflix, but something that would probably do much better than they did on Disney Plus.
Mhm.
And I mean, yeah, when you speak of like the movies, but the movies also had like huge marketing campaigns behind them. And this is one of the
Yeah.
reasons why Solo didn't perform as well, is because most of the marketing money went to
Right.
Avengers. And first of all, that is not done on Disney Plus shows. They're just putting some posters on some walls and whatever. Like they're not
Mhm.
offloading $150 million to promote the Acolyte.
Mhm.
Um, because that would be like fiscally responsible, by the way. They don't need to do that because they are not gonna get that money back. But
So I'm gonna go for it.
no, I mean, just like wrapping up, like I don't think I think that they they put themselves into a corner now, and it's like unless you start actually delivering somewhere
Mhm.
else other than streaming where nobody's
Mhm.
watching, you're not gonna get out of it.
Do you think that something that might help Disney Plus and, in essence, some of these other Star Wars shows is the fact that you can watch some watching more Hulu things that are on Disney Plus, or like you have shows like Alien Planet Earth that'll be available on Disney Plus, in the summer, things that, from FX, from Hulu, things from other places that might give it a little bit more broader appeal to people.
I I do think like first of all the people that I know that have Disney Plus here is because of those shows. I don't think I know more than one or two people who have Disney Plus because of Marvel or Star Wars. And it's mostly because of these adult dramas like Shogun or what else is out there like The Bear or something like this that gets bundled into Disney Plus, and then you're not subscribing anymore for just a Marvel show that comes out every quarter. You're subscribing for the Hulu shows as well. You're subscribing for the 20th century movies that come out there. There's like a whole other area to be explored there that there's slowly exploring now. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you go for
I'll
it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. When you go to other big streamers like Netflix, Max, Apple, Prime, all of these other big platforms that we see have shows that do better numbers than Disney Plus, their content is way more diversified. So you spend longer on these services, like, oh, I get to watch this. And then once I finish that, that looked interesting. That looks interesting. All these different things. The problem with Disney Plus is, yeah, Disney Plus is Disney, which is one
Yeah.
thing. Once you've seen one Disney movie, some people think I've seen them all. I don't need to spend as much time on Disney Plus anymore, so they don't go into the weeds to find these other things. So people just don't spend as much time on Disney. So having the Hulu elements of that, and as they add more high quality dramas, like Miguel just mentioned, there is a chance that that attention goes to other things. And of course, assuming movies like Mandalorian and Grogu are great movies, and they go on the service, suddenly that movie pops off because that's only going to be on the service. Some people are like, all right, that was great. Now I want to go watch more Star Wars. So it's all about adding diversity of content, and Disney Plus just doesn't have that, which I think is definitely an element to this as well.
I mean, that is true. There's also something to be said about Deadpool and Wolverine not really charting in these top tens. Like that is the equivalent, Marvel's equivalent to Mandalorian Grogu. Whilst something like Inside Out 2, I think did chart or was very close to doing so. And I had another point. I mean, how many times do you like turn on the TV and say, okay, what am I gonna watch tonight? And your first option is like Disney Plus. Like I usually go to Netflix or HBO first.
Well, unless you're me and you are like a 60-year-old man, I go to Paramount Plus is where
No,
I
that's
go
okay,
for
but
my
Same thing.
That's
for
what I
my
meant, like,
Deep Space Nine content right now.
but how often do you go into Disney Plus?
Every Friday
y-
night, my Andor
yeah, but
rewatch to get my
but
one
exactly, but
episode.
that's my point. Like you go there to watch something very specific. You don't
Right.
go there to browse
To go scroll.
what is out there.
If I'm browsing, I'll go to Max because I can watch, if I want to watch Game of Thrones, I can also watch Man of Steel, and then I can go find, oh my gosh, I watched some Tom Cruise movie the other day on Max, which was so good. But no, I agree. The diversity of content is something that they have to figure out. But we're talking about Disney Plus, so we might as well mention real quick. I got to keep us updated on everything. That we're 82 days away from Andor season 2. So that the number,
and this is
will be
exactly what we're just talking
70.
about: diversity of content. We need more stuff like Andor and more stuff like just something different, and just
in
like high
82
quality
days
things
we
that are
will be
different.
there. We will be
And
there.
where is the trailer?
It's coming. It's going to be here at what
Nate,
is next
you
week?
have to have some catalog of gifs that we can post on Twitter.
Yeah,
Just
I
getting
might.
desperate for a
I
trailer.
might. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea. I don't know if I can do Stephen A anymore because there's been some controversies surrounding him in recent months.
I guess so.
I'll have to find another little gimmick. So, but
If you
but I
haven't,
do think
send
there's
Nate
a
your best
chance.
gimmick ideas.
Yeah, I do think there's a chance we get something at the Super Bowl, but I'm not
No,
placing money on it.
no. There's at most there's gonna be a Disney Plus ad where there's
Yeah,
maybe like
it'll be within a
10
Disney
shots of
Plus
Andor.
added. Yeah, they won't
Yeah.
spend $8 million or
No.
more on a whole 30-second Andor spot. They certainly won't, but they could
No.
spend something on Disney Plus. So they could slot something in there.
By the way,
I'm at the point with this show where I'm expecting and I'm ready for every single episode of that show to just put me in a tailspin mentally of just pure euphoric contemplative Star Wars energy that will be just completely combustible. I can't wait for it.
completely different topic. Speaking of the Super Bowl,
Yes.
And jumping 1 year ahead, that seems like a perfect place to drop something Mandalorian and Grogu next year.
Yeah.
So whether it's like
Yeah.
a 1 minute spot, like Disney always drops something at the Super Bowl. They
What?
typically drop something Marvel, whether it's like a full trailer combined with a spot or like two trailers or whatever. But next year, I don't think Avengers is gonna be like I have my theory that Avengers 5 is not gonna be out next year, so
I don't
their
think so
main
either. They haven't
schedule is
started
gonna
shooting
be
it.
wide
Like,
empty.
yeah, they haven't
Exactly.
shot that thing at all, and that's going to be a
Yeah,
massive undertaking.
yeah. So
So good news for
jumping one
Mando and
year
Grogu.
ahead,
We won't have to deal with that again.
yeah, and I think that's like a perfect place to drop. Like I think there's gonna be a trailer with Avatar, and then something like a 50
Oh,
second teaser.
I need Avatar. Need Avatar in my life. I
Yeah,
can't wait. I hope it's 5 hours long. Sit there. Give me a brutalist. Give me longer than the brutalist. That's what I want, James Cameron.
with two
Longer than the
breaks.
brutalist. No breaks. I
Hey,
will sit
Cameron
there.
wants to do that.
No breaks.
Cameron wanted to make that 9-hour version of Avatar 3. So hey,
Give it to me.
possible.
I'll sit through it. I'll sit through it. Just like I might be able to sit through a second season of some of these Star Wars shows here if we were to give one. So, main discussion tonight, we got about 30 minutes left here. There are 4 Star Wars shows here that are without a season 2. We know are, probably not going to get one. And the question today is, do any of these deserve a second season? Or, if they had to pick one to move forward with on a second season, which one would you pick? And before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of each of these, what is your pick? If you are forced, lightsaber to your throat, or even what was it? The way that the stranger, what is Mangestino's character called? They just call him the stranger. What was it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
I don't think there was an actual
lightsaber.
name.
What was it? Like lightsaber to the head. Threatened right here. Which one would you pick? Like, which one would you pick for the second season? Where
Nate.
you're
out of the 4 of those, it's not my favorite show of the bunch, but I think the one that has the most potential, or the one I'd be most interested in seeing, would be the Book of Boba Fett. I think season 1, of course, had its issues, but I think it's an interesting enough world that I would enjoy them going back to play in and to see what Boba Fett would become going forward.
Mhm.
Of course, there's still stories going on in that time frame that we might get some update, but just I would like to just spend more time with that character and this version of that character and just see how they are, man. Like I think that'd be
Mhm.
fun. Bring back some good quality bounty hunting, good quality, and actually commit to the underworld aspect that the first season never really got into as much as it should have. That they teased in all the marketing, but it was never in the show to the full extent. So I think that would be my pick.
And you get another couple episodes of The Mandalorian too.
Exactly.
No, before we, this is actually a good comment here by Sydney for sure, because there's a lot of room with the comics and all the different characters that show up in like all the different bounty hunters comics.
Oh yeah.
To what's going on, as we get further in
Taylor
the timeline,
Valance
they
would
could
make a
oh
great
my
live
goodness.
action character. That'd be a great addition to some just this Terminator vibe to add. Like that character is rich, and that would be a very fun addition to.
I thought
Mhm.
you'd go with something like Dr. Afra.
Dr. Afra too. I mean, both of those characters fit in great with this with the crime world. So, yeah, I think there's so much to do. And it's so interesting because they never really played with the power vacuum that is Tatooine as much as they probably should have. So, yeah.
This just gives me another opportunity. Luke's heard me yell about this probably 1,000 times over the last however many years it's been. Nothing makes me more upset when they lie to us for no reason about
Yeah.
certain things. And like sometimes when they just lie for no reason. And I will never forgive Robert Rodriguez for being such a freaking liar that he would sit there and say that we couldn't show you anything outside of the first 30 minutes of the show in the trailer because it would give away too much. Like he said that. And the trailer has stuff from the last episode of the show. And it just makes me, I was so angry. Every week I was texting Luke. I'm like, there's no way we go another like week without seeing the last parts of this trailer, right? And every single week it kept happening. And Nate is so upset he left the stream because he was reminded of this. Michael, how are you, Michael? It's good to see your name right there. He says he would like Kenobi because it's very nostalgic and pays a lot of tribute to the original Star Wars movies. You know what? There is something for if any of these was going to be, and like our poll shows right now that Kenobi's winning. If you go vote on Twitter at the Star Wars Newsnet, I believe Kenobi's still winning because of the pull that a legacy character has. I'm good with season 2 not happening. But they would have to really sell me on I think you're saying, like Miguel, like they'd have to really sell you on a reason for it story wise, other than just we need a show that's going to draw a lot of people to initially to make some money. But Michael, I hope you're doing well. The Eagles are in the Super Bowl. I'm sure that you and your family are absolutely ecstatic about that. So I hope you are, victorious here in a couple weeks. Anyway, yeah, Sydney, I think Kenobi is winning. And yes, that no filler, all killer line from Robert. It just makes me so mad. Like that man, I'm done. Never again will I trust him. Oops, I just Miguel, where are you at? Which one would you pick?
The Acolyte, no discussion for me. It has to be the Acolyte. It's the one that had the most potential for future seasons. It's also the one that finally understood what Joey wanted to be by the end of the season. And it was a much stronger finale than it was a premiere. So with all of that combined, and I was actually intrigued to see what would happen to these characters after credits roll on the final episode. It has to be the Acolyte for me. Like, I don't care about your controversies with season 1. I think season 2 would have been at least better. I don't want to say much better, but at least better. And I was interested in the story, so yeah.
Right. I was the story that interests me the most is the Acolyte because of course I want, and we talked about this Monday when
Right.
Miguel and I, if you haven't, given it a listen yet, Miguel and I did a whole, podcast about, different Star Wars show ideas that we came up with and like, should Disney or should Lucasfilm move forward with these or should they not? And a Plagueis and Palpatine show was one that we discussed, and the Acolyte wouldn't necessarily be that, but it could lead to the moment where that happens at some point. And I have wanted Darth Plagueis every single moment of, my Star Wars life since I saw Revenge of the Sith in theaters. However, there was a part of me, I don't know, maybe I need to just stay away more from some of the stuff about it online, but it was so exhausting, and I just don't really, I think I said I voted for Boba Fett because I wanted something that just wouldn't create these giant ripples in the fandom and create some giant controversy. I wanted something safe, and I felt like season 2 of Boba Fett is just super safe.
The first season of Boba Fett was a trial online with some of the discourse surrounding how they handled that character, and of course Mando coming in and the deep fake of Luke. So it's definitely.
But I don't think it was even close. I don't know. I don't think it was even.
It's not anywhere close to the Acolyte. The Acolyte's another level of awfulness online.
The discussion of Boba Fett, though, to me, it felt like it was like sane discussion, like normal Star Wars discussion. Like, do you like the direction of Boba Fett? Like, do you think we should be going this way? But like the people that I thought were getting so upset about that show were like, Cad Bane's face is like not the right, color shade of blue, stupid stuff. When you're talking about that, you just don't have anything really to complain about as far as I'm concerned. So that's why I'm like, okay, we're doing we're doing okay. We have to bring up this comment from Manslayer when he said Rodriguez was like reaction before Rise of Skywalker. Nothing prepares you for it. I specifically remember watching that video at work. I had nothing going on, and he was just like, I laughed, I cried, I cheered. It just blows away every part. Is I remember watching that over and over. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is gonna be amazing. And he pulled the rug out from under me on that one. That's for sure. Sydney, with the money that Disney and Star Wars, Lucas, they lost on the Acolyte. You might have to book a full week stay. You might not be able to get away with a weekend stay. Halcyon, you might be shelling out the big bucks.
Whole weekend, you're already what, 5% into the way there.
you gotta get a full week, and suddenly they got the seed money for bringing everybody back.
Bring along the husband and a few other family members, and suddenly you're almost a quarter of the way there.
They might. Lucasfilm responds to the Acolyte season 2 petition with, "We will make the season 2 if all of you that sign this petition book a 1-week stay at the Halcyon Resort. We will use that money. It'll be a self-funded, crowdsourced project for the Acolyte season 2." No, but Miguel, where do you see in terms of this discussion, the Acolyte season 2? Manslayer had a comment before about how just having a series like that complete is very it's inconclusive, doesn't have a clear ending to it necessarily, and that might do damage overall for the continuity of the franchise for some people. And how important do you think it is, if it's not on Disney Plus, that they at least continue these stories in like print in some way?
I mean, I think they will at some point. That's one thing. Also, like, I thought that the ending of The Acolyte was a pretty good season ending, meaning perhaps not a perfect series ending. Like, there's clearly room for more story, but I think you could say the same thing about any of these other shows, that there's always room for another season. I mean, maybe not Kenobi as much, but definitely Skeleton Crew, which we haven't discussed yet, and definitely the Book of Boba Fett. Those characters are still out there. So yeah, it's inconclusive if you wanna say that, because we have never met these characters, and we will never meet them again. So,
like, who the heck is that little green guy at the end of season 1?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's gonna be one of the most unresolved mysteries in the history of Star Wars.
No, I agree, though we're not gonna see this, but there is a level of so we have the ending, and it does feel like, okay, you have Darth Plagueis in the background, and how that story goes, and this is gonna be a tragic ending for these characters. But at the same time, it does gnaw at me that I don't know how that story is resolved in any way. Versus with Boba Fett, I feel like, okay, they won the day against the crime syndicate, he's moving on, and that's that. Versus this one, it feels like a little bit more like there's a grander scale to the Acolyte, which is why it might need to be.
I mean, yes, there's a grander scale. There's also
like galactic impacting types things.
I guess there's not as much a grander scale in Book of Boba Fett as it should have been, because those conflicts that were going on there would probably should have had like more repercussions. But perhaps is it possible that you're thinking that the Acolyte had was more inconclusive, or more inconclusive because the bad guys won?
It's not because
satisfying.
Not because the bad guys won. It's more of inconclusive because I still don't know. We have like they introduced Vernestra in that show, and they make her out to be, and this isn't even like a High Republic like rant, but if you take all the stuff aside from that, this is more of, they introduced this big Jedi Master. We never once get a real, answer into like that backstory. There's a whole why is, I think any Star Wars fans watching that, and then part of the big discourse on here was, why does Yoda, who is in charge of all of the Jedi at this point, he's one of the Grand Masters on the council, other councilors, how do they know nothing of what's going on? Like, how are they this in the dark and the Jedi are this disconnected? And there's, I think a level of, now that they do know that there is a Jedi out there, red saber, dark side user, they're aware of this. And she's telling Yoda about this. How does this story get resolved to the point where the Jedi still are at a point 100 years later that the Sith are extinct? There's no reason to the Sith other than we're just expected to believe there's just a deep cover up that still exists. And I think if Vernestra's telling Yoda these things, I feel like for a lot of people, they need some reconciliation with that, so we don't think Yoda himself is covering up, the Sith being around for 100 years, because I think that does damage to, how people view who Yoda is as well. It's not necessarily that the bad guys won, because if we're following this type of Sith thread, we get to Revenge of the Sith eventually with Palpatine being the culmination, and obviously we know how that story ends, and that I don't think people are sitting there going, oh my goodness, So it's not, I don't think it's the bad guys won. I think it's just a sense of who they introduced at the end, and the way that we left those characters kind of makes you go, man, like you said before, this show really should have been something else, could have been something else. And I want that version of the show.
Right. I mean, as far as Yoda goes, Yoda is my favorite character in Star Wars, and I would not be upset if he was part of that cover-up, because I view Yoda as someone who was profoundly changed by the rise of the Empire, someone who regretted a lot of his mistakes and regretted the fact that he should have acted some other way in many instances once Anakin became Vader. And I think that the fact that Yoda would be part of that cover-up would only increase his legend going forward, meaning that is another stain on his legacy, but at the same time something he recovered from to train Luke and eventually defeat the Emperor. So
well, then at the same time, I
don't
would love to see that too, and be able to see him wrestle with that at the
yes,
same time.
but what I mean is that I guess you would have to see it, but I can connect the dots from where the finale ended. I can like say, okay, so this I know what happens 100 years later, and know what happened here, so I can bridge the gaps.
Right.
I can say, okay, Plagueis was there, and there's probably something that happened with Ocean and the Stranger that and then Palpatine joined the party and so on. So I can see the dots. I would like to see the full story, but I don't think that the Acolyte was fully unfinished.
And I'm not opposed to a Yoda cover up. I mean, I love Yoda in Cataclysm. There's a High Republic book, and Nate's familiar with Yoda being basically in charge of a massive cover up in the Jedi Order and to the Senate in that book. So for hundreds of years. So
there's precedent for it.
Yeah, there is precedent for it. I have a hard time when it comes to those type of characters. Like, when we're just gonna say that happens, those are such big characters. It's not like, to me, Ki-Adi-Mundi, if something was like going on and he found out something, like, I always just kind of took him for some random council, guy anyway. There's a little bit more weight whenever you introduce Yoda into the show, that I feel like, man, anytime you drop one of those characters in, I feel like I really kind of want to see where the direction is heading on screen with that. But Nate, if you had to do a, top 5, you're a Star Wars general manager, top like 3 or 4 bounty hunter / crime syndicate characters you could introduce into a Book of Boba Fett season 2 to really spice it up, where would you begin?
I mean, I mentioned 2 of them earlier. Baylor Valance, Afra. She'd be great. Of course, Kira would be another solid addition.
Be
Because yeah,
really
that's another.
fascinating too, because we don't know what's going on with her.
Yeah. And I know there was a lot of speculation that she would show up in the first season. There were rumors as well. So not Embo, he's busy. Hey, hey, that'd be fun though. That I'm not gonna. Embo would be a solid pick. Man, who else? Who's even alive after Return of the Jedi?
You got Ochi
Ochi?
of Bestoon. You could
No,
do something
I don't
there
think
with him.
you
I
could. I
think
don't
I'll
know
be
if I'd
way
want
too
to see
forced.
that though. I don't know if I'd want to see that though.
Is Dead Stick still alive?
I think so. We're talking from the Dr. Afra comics and whatnot, the
Right.
Crimson Dawn. I think so. That'd be an interesting adversary. Man,
Dengar's still
Like,
alive, right?
Dengar,
Chrysanthemum we
Yeah.
saw,
Chrysanthemum,
but Chrysanthemum we've seen.
Yeah, we did see Chrysanthemum.
Ventress, maybe. Ah, man, yeah, I'd have to think about that a little bit closer, but yeah, there's
So-
definitely some.
Mhm.
I mean, I'd be curious. I mean, I pitched it in the Discord. I think Rhoda would make a great crime boss. So
We
let's
might
go.
see it. We might
Let's
see
go.
it. You never
Let's
know.
go.
We might be seeing it here pretty soon. But obviously, none of us mentioned Obi-Wan Kenobi is the one that we're wanting. We had one in the comments that pointed that this is, to me, the most interesting maybe Disney Plus discussion out there, just in terms of everything that surrounded this show. I remember when the opening trailer for this show released and they had the Duel of Fates, cut away to the music, cut away to the trailer. And I thought this was, and I think a lot of people thought this was going to be the Disney Plus event. Like this was going to be the holy grail of Star Wars streaming. And I think most people left kind of going, it's all right. It had its moments, but everyone kind of left a little disappointed. And is there enough juice? Like, where would you even begin to find a story for a season 2? Because you have to be really careful with anything you do with the characters like this. But I also think if you were to come make a killer show for Disney Plus, and it involved Obi-Wan Kenobi and maybe aspects of the rebellion in some way, that would be a show that could easily skyrocket on their streaming charts if they needed it. But where would you even begin if you were trying to think of a reason for season 2?
I mean, that's kind of the problem for me, is that
Mm-hmm.
season 1, okay, maybe they didn't break canon as much as, first of all, they could have, and second of all, as it seemed that they were going to.
Mm-hmm.
But all of it was so like confusing, and it's like, yes, you're at the very least bending stuff, and you're just
Mm-hmm.
making up things that were not there before. Uh, Obviously not there before, but not even like thought of, just for the sake of telling a story,
Mm-hmm.
just because you can. And that's not the place that a story comes from. A story comes from the your need to put something in the world, and that something must not be, Obi-Wan fighting Vader. It must be the reason why he's fighting him. The underlying the motive for the story to exist. And I don't think it was constructed in that way. And because
Mm-hmm.
of that, and because of the complications that putting Obi-Wan outside of Tatooine one more time would bring, I don't think that Obi-Wan Kenobi season 2 should happen at all.
That's why I think the perfect happy medium of making you happy to put on the robes again and making the fans happy to see Obi-Wan Kenobi again is doing the flashbacks in Ahsoka season 2, and here's the beautiful thing too, is any project that we have in that part of the time they're moving forward, you can bring Ewan back as much as you want as a Force ghost to do things. Like we heard his voice. Rey has, like, for instance, New Jedi Order. Rey has heard Obi-Wan Kenobi's voice in Rise of Skywalker. He spoke to her, and she had that moment in The Force Awakens with this Force vision, and Obi-Wan Kenobi's voice spoke to her as well. Could easily have her learning to commune with Jedi. You can bring Ewan back on a big scale like that. Like there's ways to help let him put on the robes again and do all of that without having to do the season 2 necessarily.
Right, and funny story, in the new Jedi Order, they're gonna reveal that Rey is actually Obi-Wan's granddaughter. So after going from nobody,
that's gonna mess up the family tree.
Palpatine's granddaughter, she's now gonna be revealed that she's actually Obi-Wan's granddaughter.
And then in New Jedi Order 2, which takes place 30 years, later, 50 years, we'll have like a whole nother, it's just gonna be the never-ending saga. That's what that's gonna be. But I think that there's easy ways to get Ewan back in Star Wars, given how easy it is to just say, oh, the Force, it's the Force, and Force ghosts. Okay. We can still do a flashback or two. Nate, obviously, you are the most in tune with all of the comics around this time and going on here than either of us are, I would say. I think that's fair to assume. How many hurdles, and it seems like there's a lot, how many hurdles are there to jump through for them to even conceive a story for season 2 in order to preserve canon? Because they've shown a willingness to be a little loosey-goosey with the comics, but obviously you don't want to just take a torch to them all.
Yeah. There honestly isn't that much to concern themselves with in terms of canon. Obi-Wan has appeared in a few issues of Star Wars way back in like 2015. And Luke, I believe, was even younger than he was in the Obi-Wan show, so that is fine. There was that other Obi-Wan Kenobi miniseries where most of that was just flashbacks to Clone Wars and whatnot. But yeah, I think with season 1 of the show, and Miguel, you kind of touched on this, they kind of blew their load with bringing in Vader and throwing Obi-Wan off of Tatooine. So doing that again for a season 2, it's just not plausible for to risk everything again. They could do it, but it's like, why risk it? And Manslayer, you brought up this comment here about the dynamics between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. First off, they're never getting Liam Neeson back for a Disney Plus show. And second, this is the only story avenue they could go with the season 2 that I think could make sense. But
that's like a 15-minute.
I know that would get boring after a while. You can't make 6 episodes.
When I think of established characters or established things going on that could cause Obi-Wan to want to leave again, there's only 2 that really make a lot of sense to me. And one of them I think I would hate. And that's obviously Maul is still out there.
Yeah.
But it would ruin a lot of what happens in Rebels to me.
You can't do that. You really can't.
But you could do the whole
Maul's doing his own thing.
But you could do the whole you could do the whole he just thought he died the next time they meet him, just like when Vader and Obi-Wan's like, the last time I met you, I was but the learner.
There's a story with Maul they have to tell with how he went from leader of the Crimson Dawn to on Malachor. That's a story they need to tell somewhere,
right?
But obviously
the only other Obi-Wan show
isn't that, unless they kind of
go for it.
Unless, I mean, you could do like a weird live action retelling of that duel where you're kind of doing this dual storyline bits with Obi-Wan training with Qui-Gon, becoming more powerful than we could possibly imagine. And meanwhile, Maul, he's trying to reclaim some version of the power he lost. So you kind of get this two like rising of the two duels of the fates, if you will, and then we get that final meeting in the desert one last time. So that could be interesting, but I just don't. Yeah.
The only other thing is, and I think Miguel's gonna laugh when I say this. I think Miguel's gonna laugh when I say this right here. Is the only thing I think that might be worth seeing on screen is if little Corky is still alive. You know, one of the last people that's, you know, there's still some connection with, you know, Satine, and he has, you know, that's his lost love, and he finds something out that he's in trouble, or even something with Bo-Katan, you know, something going on there where he feels an obligation to help the family of the woman that like he loved. Like that could be something that would draw him possibly away from being with Luke. Just maybe as a launch point for a series. That might not be the over like arching theme of it, but just as a launching pad to get him off, I think could work initially if they were just trying to find like a story starter.
Yeah, but this is my point exactly, that you're constructing the story from a plot perspective and not a story perspective, meaning the themes, which is to me problematic and speaks of the need for monetization on these shows as opposed to just telling stories, which is obviously this is a business, and that is what is paying the bills, but at the same time it also creates lesser shows in the end.
There is still room for him to grow to who we see in Rebels season 3 for sure. I think that Obi-Wan Kenobi that we meet in Rebels season 3, and obviously to get to who we see in A New Hope beyond that, which is another several years beyond that. So there is, like Manslayer said, to him finding that final, I don't remember the way he put it, to like to accept now that he has hope, but he'll have to let go, you know, when the moment comes. I think there is a level of they can play with that theme a little bit more. But right here, they think there's room for a duel between Maul and Vader before Rebels, and after Solo, Vader is the reason of the downfall of Maul as leader of Crimson Dawn. You know, once again, Solo being as bad box office as it was, I think denied us some fun stories that, you know, could have taken place by when they reintroduced Maul, you know, back into, you know, audiences in live action. There was, I think, a willingness to tell some stories there. There's a lot that happens with Maul and Crimson Dawn, and like they said, the fallout that we haven't seen. But I mean, come on, like what about this show right here?
Let's go.
And guess who's gonna play? And the person in Kit Harington is going to star as the son of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Satine. It's actually gonna be Kit Harington playing another bastard.
I mean, that's not half bad. That's not half bad.
It's not half bad. Any Skeleton Crew thoughts before we get out of here? Just on a season 2 of Skeleton Crew.
I'd be down for a Skeleton Crew season 2. I don't need it. I think they ended the first season at a point where you don't necessarily need it. Obviously, there were plot threads they could still pull on with Jod and various elements of that. And, of course, try to answer what was left open-ended via AT-AT and stuff like that. But I'd be down. I don't need it. As much as I enjoyed Skeleton Crew, I'd love to see these kids again, and I think we will in some form or fashion. I just don't know where, but yeah, I'd be down for it. I just don't know what the story is.
Again, you just have a feeling that Neil and Grogu are going to interact with each other at some point.
That is money waiting to be made. But yeah, as Miguel was saying a little bit ago, I just don't know what the story is for a Skeleton Crew season 2. But that's why I'm here and I'm not over in Lucasfilm offices over in the Halcyon writing scripts. So
I think the story for Skeleton Crew is much easier to write though than some of the others, because the New Republic, they've gone from being isolated forever to New Republic being there. I think they could pretty easily.
There's definitely stories to tell for sure. There's definitely threads.
Finding the right one. For sure might be
I just don't know what it is. And again, I'd be down to see what they come up with for sure. Yeah, it's just any show with young actors, and John Watts and Christopher Ford have alluded to that. If they're gonna do it, they gotta plan the right way,
right?
Because these kids are gonna grow up fast, so they gotta. So if you're gonna do a season 2 and put it out in 2028, you gotta take into consideration how much these kids are gonna grow in real life. So yeah, I just don't know.
Miguel, what about you? Any initial thoughts on this one?
I mean, I'm not especially interested. I wasn't a big fan of the show, but at the same time, I do think that these characters are going to show up somewhere else. So it's not like we're not going to see them again, and it's not like that appearance down the line couldn't set up another season at some point. And I do agree with Nate that there is a lot more potential with Skeleton Crew for a second season than there is with the. I do think that with Boba Fett, and definitely with Obi-Wan.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Nate, before we get out of here, I want to get your thoughts. So, what do you think about this Disney Plus show idea? Miguel and I both had this at like number 1 on our list of our 5 that we came up with, which was Count Dooku miniseries, 2 episodes with him and Yoda, 2 episodes with him and Qui-Gon, 2 episodes with him and Ventress, right as the Clone Wars are about to wage on. Obviously, we didn't say that these were our top 5 most wanted stories in the world. We were just trying to think of 5 show ideas that, in theory, that they could come up with over the next few years.
And you said this was live action or animated?
Live action. Playing off of what we saw in Tales of the Jedi, and now we're just gonna say, you know what, we're gonna do a full-blown 6-episode miniseries.
I'd be game for it.
And what if I told you they wouldn't be 25 minutes?
Then yes, please. At some point, Lucasfilm and Disney Plus as a whole will learn this lesson that honestly, there is a discussion to be had. If these episodes are longer, that 2.7 might be 5-6 billion. So I don't know. So there's something to be said about that as well, but that's going back to the viewership numbers discussion. But yeah, I love Count Dooku. He's one of my favorite Star Wars characters, so I'm always down for more Count Dooku.
Well, you can check us out, Star Wars Newsnet, wherever you get your social media. You can check out Miguel and I's podcast on Tuesday that came out a couple days ago, where we did talk about 5 show ideas and whether or not Star Wars should or should not move forward with any of those. We will have another episode of the Timeline Show for you out this weekend doing, oh my gosh, what are we doing? We're doing like a Monster Temple Hidden Peak. What's that comic issue, Nate?
Yep. The Monster Temple Peak.
Yes, that's the one that we're doing this week.
The fabled, remembered, and definitely not forgotten at all.
Yes.
Ty York origin story, meeting the legendary Druin, who is definitely not one of the worst High Republic characters.
Can't wait to break that one down. But then next week we got Kevin Scott coming in for an interview next Thursday, which will be fun.
Yes, Kevin, if you're watching, I love Druin. So just
so can't wait for that one. So that'll be a good time. Nate, real quick, give us the rundown on the comic sphere and the reviews that we had come out today and coming out tomorrow.
This week in comics is extremely hectic. 6 new releases. So currently on the website, we have a review of High Republic Adventures, Echoes of Fear, number 4, the finale there. Great issue. High Republic Adventures number 14, the beginning of the climactic Battle of Iriadu, the High Republic Adventures Phase 3 Annual, which is just 5 short stories. There's one of Stellan and Vernestra, so if you're fans of those characters, check that out. There's Marvel's A New Legacy, which is celebrating 10 years of Marvel Star Wars comics. Tomorrow, we have Ewoks number 4, the finale of that. That issue is total, absolute bananas, chaos all over the place. I have no idea what I read, but it's awesome. I such a fun series that was for all the right and wrong reasons.
Does Legacy of Vader come out next week? The first one? Or is that 2 weeks?
Yes. Yes, Legacy of Vader begins next week. And yeah, I can't wait for that series. I cannot wait for that series. That should be really good. And then we also have, hopefully, maybe Jay will have it tomorrow or over the weekend, but we also have Dispatches from the Occlusion Zone number 4, also featuring Ty Yorick and Druin. That one's actually a good Druin and Ty Yorick story, so go check that one out. But yeah, busy week in comics and publishing in general.
Miguel, do you have any idea what you're hoping to write for your weekly Sunday piece this week?
Unless something huge breaks tomorrow, it's probably going to be about the accolade numbers and just going into a bit more detail there, comparing it with the Nielsen 2024 wrapped charts that we got. I think just after we published the story and just in general talking about the thing about the licensing the shows and so on, that what should Disney do, and exploring that a bit.
Well, that's always, like I said, my favorite read of the week. I'm not just saying that. Every time I see it pop up on my Star Wars Newsnet notifications, so I sit down, I got to read it. So make sure you guys check it out. Check us out on Apple and Spotify at Star Wars Newsnet. Leave us a review. We will see you next week, everyone. Remember, for light and life, remember, everyone, for right now, we are all the Republic.